Hello, my health freedom loving friends. Misty Karlfeld here with Health Freedom Idaho, and I am here with another mom who's had an interaction at Kootenai Health. I mean, really, people are starting to call me and message me and Health Freedom Idaho and Idaho CPS, letting us know that the cases that we've already reported on is just the beginning. But this is a really different story with Anne and her daughter Ruby, because her daughter Ruby is disabled. So the more I've talked with Anne about this, the more my heart breaks for parents with disabled children. And I've heard some of these stories, but this is really the first mom that's ready to speak out about how she's treated, not only at Kootenai Health with this medical issue, but also as a mother with a disabled daughter. Anne, thank you so much for joining me today and being willing to share your story. I appreciate that so much. People need to understand what parents with disabled children are going through.
Most definitely. I'm happy to share it.
Thank you. So tell me, you were just explaining to me that you've always felt like you are being watched because Ruby is disabled. Can you tell me about when that started?
I started noticing it when she was first ever diagnosed with disabilities. She was diagnosed when she was 10 months old, and I remember the day they diagnosed her, they brought social workers into the room and all sorts of people because she had hit her head, and I went in there to check that, and they ended up doing an MRI and a CAT scan, and they questioned me about why I never had her tested for disability before, and kind of made me feel like it was my fault that my kid was disabled in the first place. And that was probably the first time I ever realized that anything I say or do is definitely watched by the state, and you're never really sure if they have your best interest in heart or if they have their best interest in heart.
Right. I hear that a lot. So what happened about when she was 3 years old and somebody reported you for cussing too much?
Yeah. She attended the Neuromuscular Center in Spokane, the Spokane Guild School and Neuromuscular Center. And while she was attending there, I actually had one of the workers there report me to CPS because they said I swore too much. And of course that wasn't, enough to really stand on, so they threw in a bunch of other stuff that made them look even sillier for reporting me. But no matter what, if you've been reported to CPS, they have to come into your home. And I was lucky in the aspect that they kind of understood that the report was not really founded. And they came in and they looked around my home and they told me to have a nice day after showing me some of the other things that had been complained about, which was just a bunch of silly nonsense. And that was the first time I ever had CPS called on me, and it was terribly embarrassing and super scary. But it had a easy ending to it, so that was nice.
Yeah, that is good. But I think you said something like your job was in question, or what Ruby had done that evening, and cussing too much. Like, who gets to determine this in our lives? Whether other parents agree or not, that's just not the issue. Whether you agree or not that a mom should cuss in front of her children, that just is not the issue. Is the child safe, right?
That's what I said. My daughter's hard of hearing. She's almost completely deaf too, and I tried to explain that to the lady who actually called CPS on me. She told me that she did it after the fact, after CPS had already come to my house. When I went to take Ruby to class, she told me that she had been the person who called CPS, which took me by surprise because I thought we were, on a friend level, and then I found out you can't actually be friends with anybody that is a mandatory reporter because they're just kind of reporting everything.
Right. And in Idaho, everyone's a mandatory reporter.
Everybody.
So yeah, that my concern has been that it really unravels the fabric of the community, because it creates a distrust where you feel like you can't trust the people who are in your community. And in this case, it was somebody who was providing therapy for Ruby, right?
Yeah, it was I can't remember what her actual job title was, but that she was like overseeing all of Ruby's therapy. She was kind of like her case manager. So I kind of half expected her to, to have Ruby's best interest at heart and understand that I was raising my kid.
Right.
by myself to the best of my ability.
Right.
At this time, I wasn't with her dad, and I was, you know, struggling, working full time with a mentally disabled child.
No easy task for sure. So what was your interaction with CPS?
My last interaction, or
the next one after she was 3?
Oh, all right. Next one after that is CPS was actually called on me because apparently I had missed Ruby on the bus. The bus driver showed up 20 minutes earlier than they normally do, and her bus driver did that. She'd show up 20 minutes earlier, an hour late, but I had missed her on the bus, and they called CPS. Well, my house was pretty destroyed because Ruby gets bored and destroys things. She tears things apart. She rips open packages of diapers and tears those apart, any paper around or anything. So my house was pretty throttled. We had spent the night at her dad's house for the 2 nights previous to my CPS encounter. And when I had shown up at my house to get her clothes to go to a birthday party, and I planned on coming back and cleaning that night, there was CPS and cops at my door, and they bullied their way into my house. They kept saying I had no choice but to let them in. And then they would say things like, "Are you saying that we're allowed in your house?" And I kept telling them, "No, I'm not saying that. You are not allowed in my house." And I tried to stop them at the door because I was told that you never let CPS in your house. But they scared me. They had a bunch of cops who all had their hands on their maces, or on their mace, kind of just bullied their way in. They came in, they looked at my house for about 2 minutes, and then they told me they were taking my nonverbal, developmentally delayed child out of my care. And I pretty much just lost it. I think I cried for a week straight over it. And
imagine. I mean, Ruby, from what you've shared with me, Ruby needs extra. And you are the one who knows the extra that she needs. You even said to me, what an act of love it is to care for a child with disabilities like Ruby. And clearly, nobody is going to love her like her mother in that area.
That's what I tried to explain to him. I said it's a labor of love to raise Ruby. She's not an easy child. She's not potty trained, nor will she ever be. So she's still in diapers. She's 150 pounds, so she's 8 years old. She's got hormone deficiencies, a bunch of different mental disabilities. Her brain just looks kind of like scrambled eggs. It's awful. And then she has hearing disabilities on top of that. And she's loud and sometimes destructive. She's not an easy kid to care for, but I love her, so I, wouldn't want anything different.
Yeah.
Maybe be a little more sleep.
Yeah. So where did she go when they took her?
That time they took her all the way out to where was it? It was out past Bonners, I think. It was I can't remember the town that they took her into. But I know it was past Bonners by quite a while. And so they took her, like, the second time they ever took her was like 7, or the second time CPS got involved, it was like 7:45 when they took her out of my care, and they didn't find a placement home for her until close to midnight.
Wow. Is that because of her disabilities? They had to find a parent?
Yeah, they drove her all over Idaho, and the first 3 houses they stopped at denied her, said that it just wouldn't be a safe situation for Ruby or for the other children, and I agree. And finally they found a lady who was able to take her for, I think, 2 days or 3 days before she was like, I don't know what to do with this kid. And they never gave us the option of having anybody in the family take Ruby until after they realized they could not place her with the stranger, because Ruby just wasn't going to. She lives her life the way she wants to live her life, and you can't control a kid like Ruby. So they finally let my mother-in-law have her the last time, and she had her for maybe 2 weeks before the state gave Ruby back.
Interesting. Okay, so then the next time CPS was called was when you were at Kootenai Health. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was just recently, July 5th. We were at Kootenai Health because Ruby was having an allergic reaction. She had probably about 60 plus mosquito bites. because we went up to Cusick, Washington for the 4th of July, which if anybody's ever been there, it is infested with mosquitoes. And I bug sprayed her. I had dryer sheets stuffed in her pockets and in her shirt, and I did all the old wives' tale trying to avoid her getting bit, but she got bit more than anybody else up there. And at my mom's house, she climbed up onto the porch and she sat down and she fell asleep, and I noticed her legs were swelling. And so I started to panic. I had my dad carry her and put her in my car, and we drove straight out to KMC because that's the hospital that I liked. And I'd always had good experiences there. And well, I get there and I realize I'm not going to be able to get her into the hospital myself, so I pulled up to the emergency room and I asked them if they would gurney her in because her legs and feet were swollen and she was asleep. And they said, well, she looks really lethargic. I said, no, she's sleeping. You can't wake up a child like Ruby from sleep with, just like you would anybody else. When she's out, she's out. And she could sleep for hours or she could sleep for minutes. But when she's sleeping, she's sleeping.
Oh, okay.
So they gurneyed her in, and I asked for an allergy test, and they refused to do it. And the doctor reassured me that he was just doing all of these tests because they cathetered her, they took blood, they told me they were doing an MRI and a CAT scan, and he reassured me that this was all just to find out why her legs were swollen. So I thought it sounded funny, but it's not my job to know why they do the things they do. It's their job to be ethical and to be honest with the people who come into the hospital. But I knew that something was up. I went to my car to get a sweater, came back in, and there was a social worker in the room. They told me all of her tests seemed normal, that she was in fine health and everything, but they had found THC in her system, which I live on the border of Washington. You can't go to a park in Washington without seeing somebody smoking marijuana. I don't let people smoke around my kid. I definitely don't feed my disabled child drugs. Then I asked if I could see the test results, the tox report, and they told me no. I asked for the doctor's card. He told me no. I asked for the social worker's card, and she told me no.
What?
And they wouldn't even tell me. They wouldn't tell me why they ran the test that they did, but they told me my child was having a drug overdose, overdose of pot. That's what they called it. I said, no, my child is tired and sleeping and is having an allergic reaction to a ton of mosquito bites. That if they weren't going to take what I was in there seriously for, seriously, that I was just going to take my kid and go home. And that's when they threatened the medical kidnap. They said, well, if you leave, you're denying us the right to treat, and we will call CPS on you. And I said, okay, so if I don't leave, you don't call CPS? And they said, well, if you leave, we do. And they completely ignored my question. So I was like, okay, well, I'll stay. Well, then within an hour, CPS was there initially, and they came and went a few times trying to get, I don't know what they were trying to do, really. But they had a nurse check my daughter's head. They told me she had head lice. They covered her in pesticides. And she didn't have head lice. I know for a fact she didn't. I brought a knit comb in and checked her myself. So I was like, what do you mean she has head lice? Then we all have it. And they covered her in pesticides, and they didn't even treat her bug bites at all. They just did all these other weird things. And I think a lot of it was to build their bill, and then the rest of it to kind of like build their case. So it was just really awful. And I think a lot of it happened because I came in there with a disabled child, and we just got back from camping. So I'm a mess. My car is a mess. My kid's a mess. And they kind of like already made up their minds.
And what kind of insurance is Ruby on, if you don't mind me asking?
She's on Medicaid.
So they kind of have endless ability for tests and...
Oh, yeah, no, Medicaid will cover anything for her. I know we've had a lot of strange things try to be pushed on us because Medicaid will cover it, and a lot of it's just a money-making thing for them. And that's kind of why I think they did a lot of those tests, because MRIs are not cheap. CAT scans aren't cheap. And I thought, you guys, she's already gone under radiation. And I told them this. She's been under radiation more times than any child her age should be under, who doesn't have, like, cancer or something. She's had brain surgery and all sorts of things. I didn't want them going in and doing anything else to her, and I asked them not to. But they, like I said, reassured me that it was all to find out what was wrong with Ruby. And I tried to explain to them, this is her baseline. What's wrong with her is she's swelling up. She needs an allergy test.
Not only did you not get true informed consent, they were also doing procedures against, or tests against, your wishes.
Yeah, it was. They didn't ask me if I consented to any of it. They never had me sign any papers. When they did ask me questions, I was verbal about my disapproval for all of it. I just wanted to take my baby and bring her home. If everything seemed normal to them, I was just going to bring her home and take her to the pediatrician the next day. And I really wish that I had not taken her to the hospital in the first place, and that kind of sucks. I feel like I would have been better off figuring it out myself than taking her in and having them take, because they took her. They kicked me out of the room and they took her and put her in foster care she was out of my care for 5 days this time. They removed me from the room that evening, then removed her dad from the room the next day during the afternoon. And then they had us both come back to the hospital to tell us that they were putting her in foster care. That was about 5 o'clock. They didn't actually take her out of the hospital until 9:45. And then they drove her to Bonner's Ferry area, which is 2 hours away. So she didn't get, again, they put her in a car with a strange person and drove her to a stranger's house in the middle of the night and just left her there. Like, they wouldn't even let me bring her clothes. They put her in clothes that they found in the lost and found bin. And yeah, they wouldn't let me bring her clothes or diapers or anything. The lady kept telling my mother-in-law, she said, "Oh, I just have such a heart for the disabled. Oh, she's such a sweetie." And she was kind of like laying on this thick fake lie of hers. Like, I'm like, no matter how many times you say stuff like that, you're still the bad person taking this child away from her family.
Right. And so what was on the report? I'm guessing this was under imminent danger?
Yeah, they said she was in it. I don't know if they called it imminent danger or if they said, yeah, it was neglect. It was an emergency removal over neglect. And I didn't have a stable living environment, which was outrageous. They never came and seen my home. They never went and saw her dad's home. We live in separate homes. And I was like, our homes are both Ruby-proof. Wherever you're taking her right now, I can guarantee you is not Ruby-proof.
So they said she did not have a safe living environment without even seeing your home.
Yeah, without even seeing the home. They just assumed that she had an unsafe living environment, which was untrue.
And neglect in what way? What were they saying you were neglectful for?
The neglect was because I was willing to take her out of the hospital without completing her treatment, and neglect because I was unsure of how she had gotten THC in her system. And
I want to address this THC thing, and I am in no way accusing anybody of anything, so I'm just going to put that out there right now. But as people know, I'm digging into this CPS stuff, and I'm listening to stories all over the world of how children are taken. Now, there's a lady in Colorado that had her son taken, and she's like, I don't do drugs. Like, that's just not a thing I do. And in Colorado, she could use marijuana if she wanted to, but she's not, right? She's like, that's not my thing. And so they said, well, we want to drug test you. And she was like, sure thing. I have nothing to hide. So she goes to do the test, and they said, well, and she said, okay, can I get the results? And they said, no, we're not going to give you the results. Now, she was smart enough to say, okay, then I want to use your same lab. Who do you use? So the very next day, she submitted again. She paid for herself another test that went through the same lab, and that test came up clean, while the one that CPS had paid for and run through came up not clean.
So that's out of control.
That's crazy, right? And then another person said that they ordered the test kits that CPS used and put water in it, and it came up testing positive for drugs. And that was confirmed by someone else that is researching CPS stuff. So I'm not saying that's what happened in this case, but that's starting to be discussed, that these tests are coming back positive when it doesn't actually make sense for it to come back positive. So I don't really know. I'm just going to put information out there that I've seen and heard, and we've got to get to, as citizens, we've got to get to the bottom of it. And here's the other thing that's interesting to me. I was trying to think of any other service industry where you can go in and request a service, where you requested an allergy test to see if she was having an allergic reaction, and they don't give you what you've requested for, and then do a bunch of things that you're not only not requesting, but don't want and are not giving informed consent for. Is there any other industry where that is acceptable?
An allergy test when she was obviously having, like, she had so many bites and she was so swollen, and they didn't even put lotion on her until, like, I don't know, it was the next day, the day after I brought her in, about 5 o'clock. I guess they came in and put lotion on her, and the lady I guess missed a whole bunch of her mosquito bites too. It's like, oh, I can't reach them, so she wasn't even taking the fact that Ruby was swollen. And then they were complaining because they're like, well, she's not waking up because Ruby did sleep. I brought her into the hospital. It was about 7 o'clock on the 5th, 7 p.m. And she slept the next day until about 2, which I was like, well, that's normal. She had a real eventful 2 days prior, and she was tired.
Right.
And you guys have her hooked up to a bunch of machines, and you have IVs in her, and she's in a dark room. So yeah, no, she's still sleeping, you know. And they were really trying to push that she was having a drug overdose, and then they wouldn't let me see they wouldn't let me see the talk report.
Right.
And the doctor did the urine test before CPS ever got involved. That was
right.
And so I don't know if it was. I don't know how she would have pot in her system, honestly. Like I said, she eats things off the ground constantly, and we spend a lot of time in Washington because they got a lot of parks over there, and my family lives there and everything.
So she was taken from you and then ended up 2 hours away from you, and then what happened? And how many days was she away from you?
I think I brought her into the hospital on the 5th, and we went to court on the 9th. And so she was only, the 5th they told me I had to leave. I couldn't stay there at the hospital with her. So that was the day that she was initially taken out of my custody. But they let her dad stay there with her overnight, and then they let her grandma stay there with her during the day until they had a home for her. And that was the only reason they let Linda stay, is because they didn't know how to care for Ruby if she were to wanted to get up and do anything. They wouldn't have been able to communicate with her or anything, so they allowed Linda to stay because they were unable to actually care for her, which was a big mistake to even take her out of our care when they knew themselves that they couldn't do it.
Right.
And like I said, I went to court on the 9th, and I wasn't even done filling out my public defender paperwork when Steven, that's Ruby's dad, his public defender came in the room and said, oh, they're dropping all of the charges. And so I just kind of which I was happy, because my public defender kept trying to push for me to lie. It was like, say that I had an unsafe living environment, and that, my child obviously got a hold of pot, and I just wouldn't allow that to happen again. And I was like, no, I'm not doing any of that. They have you swear an oath that you're not going to lie. So somebody working for the state shouldn't be forcing somebody else to lie. And I think it's, well, God doesn't like that.
Wow. Okay. So why do you think they ended up dropping the charges? I mean, really, if they had some solid evidence about THC, why would they drop the charges?
We walked into the room, and when they went around the courtroom, everybody introduced themselves, said why they were there, basically. When they hit the public defender, she said, I want to drop all charges. Ruby, they stated that Ruby had pica eating disorder. It is possible that she could have gotten a hold of anything anywhere. Obviously, she's taken care of. Why, I don't even understand why it got to the point of her being removed from her parents, give her back, basically. And the prosecuting attorney, she said the whole thing was stupid and that there was no reason for removal. Most children like Ruby end up in group homes because their parents either are done taking care of them or can't take care of them. But we strive every day to keep our kid in our home. Like, I don't ever want to put her in, a group home. And so the prosecuting attorney was like, they're still raising their child. There's no reason to, she's obviously got a safe life, a safe house, loving parents. She's in every thing that all the therapies that she needs, all the doctors that she needs. I make every appointment. She's not neglected. If anything, she's overly, I don't know, overly watched.
I can feel that from you, and I could, even when we were on the phone, how much you love Ruby. Do you wonder, because I have had a few parents with disabled kids, or children with seizures, constant seizures, and they can't seem to find homes for them. And so I've wondered if maybe sometimes these children are almost too disabled or have too many issues that they can't put them in foster care anywhere, and so they end up giving them back. Do you feel like that's a part of what you're going through?
I think so. I think that it's harder and harder for the state to place a child that's special needs because foster parents, I don't know why a lot of them do it. I guess some of them because they, really want to help, and others maybe for more selfish reasons. But nobody in their right mind is going to be like, I totally want to not sleep anymore and clean up poop off of everything I own every day.
Nobody's going to sign up for that except for a mom.
Yeah. So I think that a lot of kids get returned based on the fact that they're harder to care for. And the ones who don't get returned, I don't even want to think about what really happened to them. I've read some horrific stories looking into all the CPS stuff. It's just scary and sad. I don't ever want to go through it again. And that's why, like I said, I plan on figuring out a way to press charges on all the people that were involved so that maybe it'll bring awareness to not only people who are going through it, but to them to realize that this isn't okay. You can't come in and mess with people the way they are. They're acting like we're not allowed to live our lives. Like I said earlier, they're completely impeding on our constitutional rights every time they do anything. You can't,
Yeah.
and you can't talk a certain way, you can't live a certain way, you can't even joke anymore in our, in our society, because anything could go wrong, and then next thing you know, your kids are right back in state care.
Well, and we know that you can't even be too close to your children because they call that enmeshment. Like in Brandon's case, they said mom and son are too close, they're enmeshed. So it just seems like they're creating a system where there's no winning and they can find any reason to remove your child.
Oh yeah, no, it's as stupid as you can't co-sleep with your kids because it's inappropriate. You can't tickle your children, that's inappropriate. Like, it's anything and everything can get your kid removed now.
Right.
I mean, we're all walking around on eggshells trying to figure out how we're going to raise our children and still, be able to raise our children and keep our children so that we can raise them without.
And it seems like you have constant, even more scrutiny with the child with special needs. But then you were saying, how often do you have somebody with the state in your home?
Oh, Ruby has therapy, therapy 4 days out of the week. So therapists are always in our home. She has a caregiver, so the social worker who is in charge of the caregiver comes into our home. Several times a week, I've got mandatory reporters in my house.
And how does that make you feel? How does that work with your family dynamics?
It's it used to be really uncomfortable. I'm lucky enough in the fact that I respect and, you know, I feel like the therapists that she have now that comes in, the ones that come into our home are strictly here because of Ruby's best interests. You know, I don't think that they're watching me like I felt in the past, like going through the guild school and everything. These ones, I really adore her therapist now, so that's nice. But it's scary that at any time her therapy can change. I can get somebody new. If I have to go into like ENT or anything, all those people are just like watching you, and it's scary.
It is scary. Yeah, it is scary. I hear that a lot. And I think one of the things that really gets overlooked is how this affects the children. You know, a lot of times I'm harping on parental rights, I'm harping on informed consent and those kinds of things. But I think one of the things that gets overlooked is how it affects our children. And they say that they're trying so hard to protect those that are actually abused. And I don't ever want to take away from the fact that there are children who are actually abused. That is the minority. So what is happening to the children that are being removed that are not being abused and end up coming back to their homes? So how did this affect Ruby?
Oh, it's since we've gotten her back from foster care, like I said, she was not gone for very long, but she had stopped signing. She quit trying to use the potty. She has become super aggressive, like really aggressive. She's become a lot more loud. And every night since she's been back, almost every night, she's woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And she gets up and she's on a rampage. Like, she's doing things that I've never seen her do before. The other day, she took her tablet outside and tossed it in the pool. She knows that that's not okay. Just things like that she's become obnoxious. But I imagine that it's all for. I probably would be too. It had to have been really scary and traumatizing what she'd gone through. Like I said, I don't know the lady that got her. I did talk to her on the phone a few times, and she seemed really nice. But I know that my daughter went to a house with 3 boys in the house, which is, nothing, I have a son too, I have nothing against boys, but I have a nonverbal daughter who can't say if anything went wrong, and she's got one teenage boy and 2 boys around Ruby's age, and a little girl who was like 13 in her home. And I don't know if they were all her kids or if they were foster kids. But either way, I felt like it wasn't really a safe situation to put a child who's nonverbal. I don't think taking a nonverbal kid away from the people who love her is a safe situation.
Right.
She came back. I don't know what happened while she was gone, but something had turned a switch in her head that brought out a little bit of a monster recently.
Right.
We're working on getting her back on track, but it's been hard. She's still really confused about sign language, and we had her signing pretty well, and she's definitely not going to try to use the toilet, So.
Wow, I'm so sorry, and I'm sorry for Ruby, but I feel like we've given her a voice today, and you as well. So I hope that I hope Kootenai Health is listening. That's really the goal of me doing these videos and giving these parents a voice. Is I want to affect change. The citizens want change at Kootenai Health. They want to feel safe to walk into their hospital and not be bullied by CPS. And if they're using CPS to increase their funding or increase their profits, it seems to me that it's going to backfire because people are going to stop going. So I think it's in their best interest to figure out this line of when to call CPS and when to trust the parents and when not to intervene, or they've got to start honoring informed consent. At the minimum, they've got to start honoring informed consent. So anyway, I hope that we've done that here today, Anne. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Definitely, and thank you so much for everything you're doing. This is awesome.
Absolutely, Anne. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.